welcome to The Jump Show. I'm your host, Michael, mainly known as Willow, and I'm joined by Jake Price. Meet Jake. Everything that's attractive about our podcast is all him. I like to call him our graphics guru. He has an eye for a big price handicap plot and won our in-house Cheltenham tipping competition last season. And Dan Overall. This is Dan. He was last season's Racing TV Tipstar champion. He was also a part of the Race Hour Cheltenham preview panel and has been unlucky enough to share a podcast with me for the past 2 years. We trialled this podcast on my channel last year and we had brilliant success, so we're bringing it back with a shiny new channel dedicated to just this. So what is this? This is our season preview, something to get the juices flowing for you all. We have horses to follow, horses to forget, trainers to keep an eye on, and much more, so please do buckle up and enjoy. We're going to get started with a bit of spring cleaning firstly, highlighting any news you may have missed over the summer months, some rule changes and calendar changes. And as I'm sure you're already sick of my voice, so I'm going to pass you on to Jake, who will be informing you all about some rule changes for the novices and juveniles. Take it away, Jake.
Yeah, so one of the big changes for this season is that novice and juvenile hurdlers will have to have 4 runs over hurdles before they can run in a Class 1 or Class 2 handicap hurdle. So that means that Stateman, for example, who won the county hurdle this year, he only had 3 runs, so he wouldn't have been able to run in the race. So it's basically trying to allow the handicapper to get a better grip on these unexposed novices that are going to the big festival handicaps with only 3 runs. So yeah, it's just something to look out for when you're looking at your festival handicappers this year. They need to have had 4 runs before they can run in something like the Martin Pipe.
Dan, I believe you looked into the 3-year-old hurdle races. Is this as simple as just copying what the French model have done?
Well, I mean, it's slightly different, but I think the premise is basically the same. And I think that highlighting the French model is a good example. We've also seen it in Ireland with their 4-year-old point-to-points and the success they've had in that sphere. And I think British racing in general just lacked something to give younger horses some experience and that held them in good stead when they were going into more competitive waters under rules. And I think this is probably a good step in the right direction, to be honest. I guess some would be initially concerned that it's saturating an already quite saturated race program. But I think there's only going to be 23 of these races. I think 11 October to December, another 12 in January to April. And I think the fact that it allows these horses to run in novice company next season, I think it's going to encourage quite a high level of participation, to be honest. It's going to be one of those, it's going to take a few years for us to really see how it plays out in terms of how it affects like novice hurdle numbers, juvenile hurdle numbers, like junior bumpers, I imagine might suffer a bit as a result. Well, I never really thought they were all that useful in the first place. But in terms of how it affects the performance moving forward, and if we can kind of get on a level plateau with the French and the Irish, then I think it's a good development. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in the next few years.
I wanted to quickly touch on a few notable retirements from the season. We had Concertista, Stormy Island, Album Photo, Melon, Buvadere, and of course the beloved Grandji, who's retired. I don't know if you want to say a couple words on this, Jake.
No, well, I mean, what a mare. Couldn't believe what she managed to achieve for us. So for such little money, it just shows how much fun you can have in the National Hunt game.
And it would be very rude for us to not talk about Michael O'Leary walking back, cap in hand, tail between his legs to close Sutton. Jake, I'll head to you. Willie Mullins, obviously, he just had an embarrassment of riches anyway. Do we know the sample size or the amount of horses that will be heading to him?
No, it's been described as a small team of horses that are going over. One of the ones that is confirmed is Shanbally Kid, who won a bumper at the back end of last year at Clonmel, and he went for 190,000 at the sales. So he's amongst the team. I think a lot of them are unraced sorts as well, and you know, younger horses. So yeah, it's interesting. It's almost exactly 6 years ago since the original split between the pair. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this season.
Yeah,
it's good to have them still in the game, though, right? I mean, I know they very much divide opinion, but I think all in all, I think when they announced they were almost getting out of the game entirely, it did seem like quite a big blow because obviously they spent a good amount of money, and although it seems like it's going to be a more select approach on the horses they're buying, I think just having them in and around the game, I think for the most part, it should provide some good value both on the track with the horses and also with some of their more interesting comments to the media. So we've got that to look forward to still.
Absolutely.
Jake, you touched on it there. You say that there's mainly going to be new horses coming in. Do we know at this point if any horses who are already in training have moved to Willie Mullins' yard?
No, it's just that Shanbally Kid that's been confirmed.
Okay.
As I said, yeah, a lot of unconfirmed horses really. But Jigginstan have been buying elsewhere as well. They've got quite a few with Gordon, a couple of that I'll touch on in a bit that have topped some of the sales as well. So yeah, they're definitely back in the game, but as Dan said, just a lot more select than they used to be.
Oh, that's a brilliant little segue. So I'll be chucking it back over to you. I know you've spent all summer going through the sales. Go on. This is Jake's time to shine. This is where he's gonna rattle off some of the big sales horses from this summer.
Hey guys, I wanted to stop the video just to tell you all about our new Telegram page. For the most part, it's going to be a chat room where we'll be posting all the big news stories so you make sure that you don't miss out on anything, but we'll also have friends of the channel to come on and share news, and although we can't confirm how regular they'll be, we'll also be sharing some of our best bets for the jump season as well. Click the link down below and join for free today.
Yeah, way to put the pressure on.
Yes.
Pressure makes diamonds. Come on.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, I'll get Willow to put the graphics on the screen so that you can see some of the graphs and charts I've put together. But basically what I've done is I've put the stats together for all public sales since November 2021. So it doesn't include any private purchase, obviously, because there's just no way of knowing how much a horse has gone for. And I've also ignored store horses because they're just impossible to track where they've gone. Most of them are unnamed. And then, so basically it comes down to all of the point-to-point recruits, all of the French recruits, any horses in training that have moved from yard to yard, and any bumper horses that that have been sold on as well. So unsurprisingly, Gordon Elliott tops that chart in just shy at 5 million, and Willie isn't too far behind on 4 million as well. So obviously some big numbers being spent. And following a good season, Donald McCain is up there as well. He's quite an interesting name on the list with over 1 million spent on him following his really good season last year. And then obviously Nicky Henderson is comparatively lower, but he's only actually purchased 9 horses publicly. So he must have a lot of private purchases in the background that we just don't know about yet. If we move on to like the individuals that have been purchased, then the most expensive has been Croke Park. He made £400,000, and he joins Gordon Elliott for the Jigginstown team. As I mentioned, they're back in the games, got the highest, the horse that made the most money of the whole summer. And then Deeply Superficial became the most expensive mare as well this year. She went for 385k and she joins Gordon Elliott for the Alma stud. One I wanted to touch on was Jet Powered. He's the most expensive British purchase at 350,000 guineas. He went to Nicky Henderson and he runs in Joe Donnelly's Shishkin colours. He was a highly promising A-length winner at Boris House, and he's a half brother to Western A Lady, who was rated 142 for Willie Mullins. He did some work in the spring and is going to go novice hurdling this year. And then one other that's been well touted is Better Days Ahead. Gordon Elliott's mentioned that he did some pieces of work at the back end of last season in some like schooling bumpers, and he's been touted for the champion bumper, and he cost 350,000 for Bective stud. So yeah, there's a couple of names there, and I think Dan, you might have a couple other to mention.
Yeah, just one. Actually, another Gigginstown one has gone to Gordon Elliott, and a horse. He's related to a horse I absolutely loved in The Storyteller. The horse is called Stellar Story. I think he was of that under the high 6-figure purchase as well. I mean, I love The Storyteller. He was a model of consistency in all disciplines, and a full brother to him. So you would expect he would be half decent. And also a mare Kudashiva is a half sister to Don Cossack. So plenty of smart related types. I mean, at this stage, we are purely speculating on ability based on rumors and prices and pedigrees. So some of these could be well beaters, some of them probably certainly won't be, but it's just one of those constant cycles of the jump season when we get probably overly excited about all these point-to-point winners, and it's just a constant lottery about which one's going to be one of the world beaters, and they'll probably all be about 10-1 for the champion bumper and the Supreme anyway. So at this stage, we know how this game goes.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm going to put up a list actually of the top 20 most expensive horses. So it'll be interesting to see which ones become absolute flops throughout the season and which ones actually do go on to, Cheltenham success.
By this point, you should all be signed up to our Telegram. And we've teamed up with Adam, who also known as GG Banker, and he put together an exclusive piece on French recruits and their Triumph hurdle prospects. So if you want to learn more about some of these sales horses, it's definitely going to be worth checking out the Telegram page to see what Adam had to say about it. Also, a nice little plug to him, because you should go check him out on Twitter. He puts out lots of brilliant content.
Just to touch on that, we've put together a list of like over 100 French recruits, basically, mainly obviously Adam. I've helped it where I could. And yeah, we've got, I think down on the list now, we've got Willie Mullins having 40 of those 100.
Yeah.
So obviously there's some ridiculous numbers coming into Willie Mullins' yard this year. And obviously across the board, some really top names that Adam's quite excited about. So yeah, it's definitely worth going to check that out to get some early prices for Cheltenham Festival races if you are interested.
There was a time where Willie couldn't win the Triumph, and he could generally have the first 5 home this year.
Yeah,
It's ludicrous what he's got to work with this season, both in the juvenile and novice hurdle division. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to some trainers to follow. I personally think Nichols would do well, but that's not telling you guys anything you do know already. So
True,
Dan, who is a trainer that the viewers should be keeping an eye on this season?
Well, I mean, I'm hardly going too under the radar either, to be fair, with a guy who's been around the game longer than I've been, or we've all been alive. But John Joe O'Neill is one I think has been going for a bit of a transitionary period over the last few years. If you actually look at the Trainers' Championship, he actually dropped 12 places last season compared to the season before, and actually earned less prize money than the previous year as well, despite the increase because of the drop during the 2021 season due to COVID. But he actually had more winners last season than he did since 2014, 2015. Like, it was his highest total in 6-7 years. And I think that's probably emblematic of a yard just going through a bit of a transition. He went for a bit of a barren spell in both in terms of number of winners and overall quality. Some of the stalwarts are competing at the top level and consistently earning good money. We kind of phased out. But last season, he brought some very interesting prospects through. Any harm in asking being one of them. There's a few other bumper horses like Collector's Item, Fame and Concrete that are very promising individuals. And I think if you look at the document that Jake showed earlier, the spend in that yard is very high. It's 1.8 million or close enough to that number. So he's right at the top of that. St. Davy, I think, being one of the more highly touted point-to-point horses that he's got in the yard. So I think in the next couple of years, we could see a bit of a John Joe O'Neill resurgence. And I think he's probably due one as well. And hopefully some of these nicer bumper horses of last year and pointers go on to make exciting novice hurdlers, and we can see John Joe back at the top level.
Jake, I remember last year you rolling out some big trainers who've had heavy investments. Have you got one that could slip under the this season, or have you gone for a more well-known trainer?
Yeah, I want to touch on 2 trainers actually. So the first one is Lucinda Russell. She finds herself 12th in my list of highest spenders at public auctions. So yeah, she's had quite a heavy investment at 965,000. But she had a really good season last season. She improved 3 places in the Trainers' Championship, and she increased prize money by 319,000. So obviously, Ahoy Senor was a big driver of that. But over the summer, she's actually reduced her numbers quite a lot. So she only had 18 runners over June, July, and August this year, compared to 49 in 2021 and 50 in 2020, despite COVID. So it suggests that she's shifting her focus towards the winter season rather than the summer, which is good to see. So I think she's going to have a good year. And conversely, Oliver Greenhill's season wouldn't have gone how he wanted last year. Despite only training 1 less winner than they did the year before, he actually fell 19 places in the table to 48th. And between September 21 and February 2022, he only recorded 9 winners from 187 runners, which is like 4.8% strike rate. So it wasn't a good run. In January, they only had 5 runners. So I assume they must have had some kind of virus or bug or something, and they've just completely shut it down and reset. But they've had another 500,000 of investment over the summer, and they've got some really nice, well-handicapped horses that cost quite a lot of money last summer as well. So they got the likes of Jet and Magic, who cost 75k, and Adjournment, who cost 45k, that should hopefully bounce back this season. So yeah, there are 2 trainers to keep an eye on, and they should be up, doing even better this year.
Time to move on to the horses to forget. Now, Jake will absolutely beat me if I didn't mention last season's performances. The almighty Jake Price told us that Echoes and Rain was an absolute no-hoper. The mare raced 5 times, being beaten on every single occasion. He didn't stop just there, though. He also said Pink in the Park was a horse you should avoid, and that horse raced 4 times, being beaten on 3 occasions at odds of 5-4, 7-4, and 11-4, and went off fab on every occasion as well. We also bowed down to Dan, who put up Monmoral as his horse to forget. And this horse raced 3 times, losing every single time, including his 9-4 Fav and the National Spirit. Myself, I went a little bit more bold. I said Chantry House was a horse to forget, a dual Group 1, Grade 1 winning novice chaser. Now, he was able to win 2 out of 4 of his races, but we did get him beat as 3-1 Fav in the King George, so that wasn't too bad. it's going to be very difficult to hit those heavy heights of last season. We're going to give it a good go. Dan, who is a horse that viewers need to forget?
Well, I'm almost conceding straight away that this horse will win a race. So that perfect kind of record is immediately going out the window. But I said after Cheltenham, I wasn't sure about this horse. I think he was getting undue praise, and his price for next year's Cheltenham, I thought, was just based purely on reputation and not necessarily on what we'd actually seen. And that horse is James's Gate, who I think at the minute is, I think, like 14 to 1 for the Ballymore. And on prices, he's touted up to be Willie's second best novice hurdling prospect for next season, which to me just is a bit baffling at this stage. I mean, he was impressive that day at Punchestown when he won, but the form of that race is abysmal. And then he very much became the shrewd guy's horse of the Champion Bumper. It was a good performance, but let's be fair. I think outside of the front two, that race in general was a bit of a head scratcher. Obviously, it was looking at one stage, it wouldn't even be run because the course was borderline flooded. I mean, I'd left that at that stage because I was just been soaked through all day. And I'm not necessarily sure what he achieved there. It was a good run, but nothing that really blew me away to think he's a top notcher. And then he got beat at 4-9 at Punchestown, yet he's still so highly rated in all the anti-post markets, which I just can't really believe. In some places, only a couple of points between him and American Mike for the Ballymore. And I think a lot of that is just based on his owners, obviously sponsoring the Ballymore and almost being certain to get there. But I'm getting what do you want vibes about him to the extent where I think he's a good horse. He'll win a maiden hurdle at like 1 to 5, all very good. But I think at the top level, I'm just not sure he's there. I mean, Willie's got about 30 French recruits for the novice hurdle division. Surely there's got to be at least 1 or 2 that are better than James's Gate. Obviously, Facile Vega being the great hope for him, but I just think he's been unduly hyped. So I'm not sure he's a tip-top novice hurdle prospect.
Jake, I will pass on to you. Feel free to throw a jab back at Dan if you see necessary, because I do remember you saying that James's Gate was a long-term anti-post pick for yourself. I think it might have been for the Ballymore. But if not, also we'll take your horse to forget.
No, I mean, I agree on the sentiment in terms of, a lot has changed since I put that bet up as, a possible bet for back in March after the festival finished. The landscape's changed a lot since then. He's a very short price compared to the rest, and I'm sure something will come out of the depth. So it's not the worst shot in the world. I still think he'll have a good season, but whether he's good enough to win a Ballymore or not will obviously remain to be seen. The horse that I'm going to be going for this year actually was a very good novice hurdler, and last year I just didn't really want him at all as a novice chaser, and that's Bob Ollinger. So he wasn't really that good at Punchestown in January when he won that Grade 3. I remember us talking about that on the podcast and just being a bit like, we didn't really know how good he actually was that day. And then he was obviously going to get annihilated by Galloping Deschamps and the Turners before we all know what happened there. He was pulled up at Punchestown where Henry tried to rush him back from a bit of an injury, and he admitted he regretted running him that day. But either way, I just don't think he's taken to fences that well. And I think he's going to struggle in an open company this year, where it only just gets harder for him. He just screams a type of horse who's going to be switched back to the stayers hurdle halfway through the season to me. Bob Ollinger's the horse. I don't know how short he's going to be. I'm sure at one point in the season he'll be, odds on or a very short price. Perhaps more towards Cheltenham, he might be a bit of a bigger one, but I think he's one worth taking on.
I do hope they go back to hurdles because he did look very awkward over a fence last season. I will say that. My horse to forget is Classical Dream. I'm just certain that he's going to struggle this year. He was fouled 4 out of 4 races last season, winning only 2 of them. He should have really been 1, but the starter gave him a disgusting 10-length lead on seasonal return. And he won a bang average Punchestown Stayers hurdle, or at least I thought it was pretty bang average. Stuffed at 1 to 3 in the Galmoy hurdle, I believe it's called. I think his biggest flaw is that I don't think he can back up a performance, which if Willie has learned his lesson, that could really help him out. But this division could look a little bit stronger this year with the likes of maybe Zanna here. If he steps up to 3 miles, which I think he will, he could be a useful horse in the Stairs division. And also someone like Blazing Cow could have a bit more to give as well. So yeah, if in doubt, boys, tip a horse with a terrible injury record.
Well, you've both done that. You both picked horses who have recently been injured, whereas I'm going with the up-and-coming novice hurdle prospect. I mean, talk about playing it safe, lads.
Yeah,
Come
yeah.
on. Isn't Classical Dreams going to be 10 years old next year as well, I think, as
No,
well?
no.
Just
I know. I
unbelievable.
think he's only going to be 9 years old, isn't he?
Oh, we are
Yeah,
picking
the year.
We are grasping at straws here, lad. Come on. We all know who's gone the ambitious one here. We all know. It may blow up in my face, but you know what? At least I went out on my sword and shield. It was you two cowering, sticking these horses that no one likes and is happily to lay anyway. Shocking for me.
We should have gone for Constitution Hill and really stuck our necks on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm surprised you didn't go Honeysuckle. To be fair, Willow, we know like you've been trying to get a beat.
That ship
every
has
start
sailed.
of the life.
That ship has well and truly sailed. The one year she might actually get beaten as well. Horses to follow. Jake, I'm going to head to you because I don't know why. I believe you've got an interesting one.
Yeah, the first one I've got is actually never raced in Britain or Ireland before. He's a French recruit. He comes over from the David Cotton yard, and he's called Traprain Law. Obviously, we'll put the names up for all of these on the screen so you guys know who we're talking about. But he's a 4-year-old gelding. He's joined Lucinda Russell in the Raymond Anderson green colours. And he was always owned by that owner, actually. He's just moved yards. But he ran 4 times in France last season. He finished 3rd on 3 occasions. He was pulled up in the last one with a bit of a poor performance. But he had a very good 3rd behind Lo Dessous, who's joined Dan Skelton since and is quite an exciting prospect for the season. And having spoken to Lucinda, she said that he's going to be kept in maidens and novice hurdles this year because he's still a novice, even though he's ran 4 times over hurdles already. So that's obviously useful. He's actually ended up at Chepstow on Sunday, so we might get to see him fairly soon. But according to Adam, his official rating will already be around 130. So I think up in the north, he can really, pick up some races. Moving on to some more well-known names. So I like to look at novice handicap chasers and novice chasers. These novice hurdlers have just looked massive and ready for a fence already. And the first one that I really like is Rioja for Harry Fry. He's a 6-year-old in the Jago Family Partnership colours. He was second to Giuliano Bello, obviously, who went on to win a Grade 1 at Aintree on his hurdles debut. And then he went and won at Chepstow on his next start, over 2.5 miles, where he beat Complete Unknown, who's rated 135. And that was off level, so that was another good performance. He then stepped up to 3 miles in January at Kempton and just proved to success. He was odds on that day, but it was just a very good performance. He disappointed a bit in a handicap after that, where he was tried in a Grade 3 at Sandown. It was obviously like bottomless ground. I think it was just a bit too much for him so early on, but he's only rated 128 somehow. So I think he could easily hack up in a novice handicap chase and then go into better novice chases after that. I don't know what the plan is for him, but yeah, he's going to make a good chaser. And then the other one I like a bit more under the radar is Shollock Jack. So he's another 6-year-old trained by Dan Skelton, this time in the Sullivan Bloodstock colours. He was a very impressive point-to-point winner. And then last season, he went and won 2 novice hurdles for Dan Skelton and Harry Skelton. First at Leicester in December in pretty heavy ground, and then second at Webby in similar conditions. And he absolutely slew through the mud and just, won on the bridle both times, really. He was last seen in the Grade 2 Premier novice hurdle at Kelso, where he disappointed a little bit on quicker ground. But stepping up and tripping, going over fences will be the absolute making of him. He's already a point-to-point winner, and he's got an official rating of 125, which I think can definitely be exploited for a couple of victories this year. So yeah, they're my 3 main ones for the season.
I've got only one horse to follow, and that's going to be West Cork for Dan Skelton. Cheers. He was a really consistent horse last season, obviously barring his fall, and he also did pick up a small injury at Ascot. But for the most part, I feel he was a really solid handicapper. Now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the plan is to send him novice chasing. And I do like that angle because I think he might have just sort of reached his ceiling over hurdles, and this could open up a few more races for him. Now, by no means do I think he's going to be an Arkle contender or anything like that. But I think they'll most probably just take a similar route that they did with Third Time Lucky. Obviously, it's the same owner and the same trainer. I can see those races sort of picking themselves for him. I think he could have a really good season. I reckon he could notch up a few wins over fences. Definitely one for the early season targets. And Dan, yourself, how many have you got?
Well, I've got 4 noted down, but I feel like I could be here all day.
You could. This 1 second. Before we go any further, this is a perfect time to say that these are 4 cherry-picked horses to follow
But Dan also is doing a horses to follow section with Racing TV. You'll find that all over his Twitter page. You'll find it all over the Jump Show's Twitter page. I believe we retweeted all of them as well, giving the boy as much support as possible.
Yeah, and those ones, despite none of them having won a race all of last season, these ones actually have, which you would not believe how easier that makes things. I was torturing myself all summer to make these 20 list of winless horses, and then I could do this one in like 10 minutes. I just clearly just like torturing myself. But this is, we'll start with two mares. One is probably my main one, and we mentioned Adam earlier in the program. I remember he mentioned this horse to me at the beginning of last season. He and another prominent French racing journalist were extremely keen on her, and even compared her to Epatante. And her name is Holly. Now, she won a couple of Grade 3 AQPS races in France, fifth in a Grade 1, and then she made a British debut in Uttoxeter Mayor's Maiden Hurdle, but was incredibly weak in the market that day, 7-2 out to 9-1, but shaped with a lot of promise. And that race actually turned out to be a pretty strong affair, given what it was. And then next time out, she was mightily impressive, beating a decent rival in the shape of a Chris Gordon horse who's now rated 120, Storm Dennis. And the golfing class that day was just so stark to see. It was a truly run race. She traveled through the race so well, and she's just got such a lovely way of going, and she's so naturally quick. She's got a mark of 125. I think if they went down a route where she was in handicaps, she would make a complete mockery of that. But I generally think she's a graded level mare. 2 miles is her trip without a doubt. She's very slick. She's very quick. Like, I'm not quite sure where she'll end up, but I think given the depth of the mare's program, she's going to pick up plenty of races this season. I can definitely see her being a top graded level mare come the end of the season. This time, we'll move on to some geldings this time, and a novice hurdler I'm very interested in. I think actually might turn out to be one of the top British novice hurdlers around, and that's a horse called Huddenback for Fergal O'Brien. Ended up finishing third at Aintree last time out. Previously on his Chepstow debut, it was one of the more taking bumper debuts I thought all season. Came from last to first to win pretty impressively, and that form has actually worked out quite decent. Again, his run at Aintree coming from the back, which doesn't suit that track. Again, that was another standout performance. And I think he's just a horse with an awful lot of ability. If you look at his pedigrees by Chaparelli, whose best project he's been the likes of Roddle Pump, Interfatigable, Watmore, etc. His dam won over an extended 3 miles. He's related to a few point winners. So he's almost certainly going to appreciate further. And his run style would already suggest that. I can see him probably turning up in something like the Challow. I think the Fergal O'Brien team really rate him. And I think he will maybe be able to compete in Grade 1s this season. He's not going to win at Cheltenham or anything like that, I doubt. But in British only races, he's definitely one to keep on side. And then the fourth and final, I know you'll be glad to hear, we're nearly over, Willow, it's okay. Nicky Richards trained novice chaser named Soft Risk, who won 3 of his 5 starts last season. I'm always generally impressed when horses can win under double penalties, even if it's fairly weak races. I think it does take some effort. And he's just been one of these horses with a very likable attitude who just kept progressing. He finished second in a couple of handicaps towards the back end of last season. He went off even money for a Class 2, I think, in the first of those. So I think that kind of shows you the regard in which they held him. That was off 123. And it was probably a bit unlucky to basically bump into a complete handicap plot that day. And then again at Ayr, he ran another nice race, giving a lot of weight away. And he just looks like the kind of type who's going to improve a bundle for fences. He's got plenty of scope for mark 128, handles most conditions. And again, I think he's quick enough to start off over 2 miles, but in time, 2.5 should be no problem. And I'd be quite amazed if he can't pick up his fair share of races, especially in the Northern Circuit over fences. And breathe.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
He was another one on my list, actually. On my list of novice handicap chasers, he's definitely up there for me.
Good man. Good man.
That is going to just about wrap up the season preview, and just in time as well, as we have the little countdown dropping us in. I don't know if you boys have anything else to add at all.
No, I don't think so.
Radio silence. Yeah, sorry, go on.
I'm sick of talking, mate. I just spoke in the last 5 minutes. No one wants to do anything else from me. I can't give the people a rest.
It's just great to be back having jumps racing again. It's obviously the most exciting time of year where we've got everybody is, exciting at this point. We've got all these horses to follow that, halfway through the season, half of them will probably be useless, but it's the time where you can dream. So, it's a very exciting time, and glad to have the jumps back.
Once again, if you guys haven't joined our Telegram, now is the time. We're going to be putting lots of exclusive bits on there, so do not miss that. And of course, if you're new around here, please drop a sub and do not forget to like the video. We'll be back with hopefully some very good regular content for you as well.